Jake Morrison felt his stomach drop as the transport ship shook violently around him. Red warning lights flashed everywhere and alarm sounds filled the air. He gripped his seat tighter as the ship spun out of control through space. The UHS Dakota was supposed to be a simple supply run to the outer colonies. Jake had made this trip dozens of times before as a Marine sergeant. But something had gone very wrong with the engines. Sparks flew from control panels and smoke filled the cabin. "All crew to emergency pods," came the captain's voice over the speakers. But Jake could see through the small window that the other pods had already launched. He was alone. The ship's computer spoke in a calm voice that did not match the chaos around him. "Emergency landing sequence activated. Nearest safe location, Kepler 7 mining station. Distance, 47 minutes at current speed." Jake strapped himself in tighter and checked his gear. His pulse rifle was secure in its holder. His combat armor was functioning normally. If he survived the crash, he would be ready for whatever came next. The ship hit something hard. Jake's head snapped back against his seat as metal screamed and bent around him. Emergency foam sprayed everywhere, covering him in thick white material. The world went dark. When Jake woke up, everything was quiet. Too quiet. He pushed away the hardened foam and looked around. His section of the ship had broken away from the main hull during the crash. Through a crack in the wall, he could see stars and the curved surface of a space station. Jake grabbed his rifle and a supply pack, then crawled through the twisted metal to reach the outside. His emergency pod had crashed into one of the station's docking bays. The Dakota was nowhere to be seen. Pieces of debris floated in space around the station, glowing red from the heat of re-entry. Something was wrong with Kepler 7. Jake had visited mining stations before, and they always had ships coming and going. Workers moving cargo, lights in every window. This station looked different. Dark sections where there should be activity. And the docking bay doors showed burn marks from energy weapons. Jake moved carefully toward the station's airlock. His boots made soft sounds on the metal deck plates. The outer door opened normally when he pressed the control button, but inside the airlock he saw something that made him freeze. The control panel had been changed. Strange symbols covered the buttons where human writing should be. Wires and circuits that did not belong there had been added to the system. Someone had modified the station's equipment, and it was not human work. The inner door opened with a soft hiss. Jake stepped into a corridor that should have been full of miners and technicians. Instead, he heard voices speaking in languages he did not recognize. The sounds came from deeper in the station, where the main work areas were located. Jake moved quietly down the hallway, keeping his rifle ready. The lights were dimmer than they should be, and the air felt different, heavier somehow. He could smell something strange, like metal and electricity mixed together. Through an open door, Jake saw his first alien. The creature was tall and thin, with 4 arms and skin that looked like green crystal. It wore some kind of armor that glowed with soft blue light. In its hands was a weapon that hummed with energy. Jake pressed himself against the wall and watched. The alien moved with purpose, checking readouts on screens that had been changed from their original human design. It spoke into a small device attached to its helmet, using sounds that hurt Jake's ears to hear. More voices answered from other parts of the station. Jake counted at least 6 different types of speech, which meant multiple alien species were working together here. That was not good news. In his 12 years as a Marine, Jake had learned that when different alien groups worked together, it usually meant military action. Jake found an access panel for the station's maintenance tunnels. The small passageways ran between the walls and under the floors, allowing repair crews to reach important systems. More importantly, they would let him move around the station without being seen. Crawling through the narrow tunnels, Jake began to understand how much trouble he was in. Through ventilation grates, he could see aliens in every major section of the station. They had set up equipment he did not recognize. Weapons that looked more advanced than anything humans used. Communication devices that projected images in the air. In the central hub of the station, Jake saw the biggest group of aliens working on what looked like a massive radio transmitter. But this was not for normal communications. The dish was pointed toward human space, and the power readings on nearby screens were enormous. Jake counted the enemies he could see. 30 in the hub area alone, at least 20 more spread throughout the station. And these were just the ones he could observe from his hiding spots. There could be many more in areas he had not reached yet. The aliens came from different worlds, but they all wore military-style armor and carried weapons. Some were tall and graceful with smooth, pale skin. Others were short and heavily built like living tanks covered in thick plates. A few seemed to shimmer and fade, as if they were not completely solid. But they all moved with the same disciplined patterns that Jake recognized from his own military training. These were not explorers or traders. They were soldiers, and they had taken over Kepler-7 for a reason. Jake found a computer terminal in an unused storage room and connected his military scanner to it. The station's systems had been partially integrated with alien technology, but enough human programming remained for him to access basic information. What he found made his blood run cold. Kepler-7 had been captured 3 days ago. The human crew of 47 people was gone. The aliens had converted the station into some kind of forward base, and they were preparing for something big. Jake's scanner picked up energy signatures from at least 100 different alien soldiers throughout the station. They had superior numbers, better weapons, and technology he did not understand. He was one human marine with limited ammunition, trapped on an enemy-controlled station with no way to call for help. But as Jake studied the alien patrol patterns and equipment through the station's security cameras, he began to notice something important. Despite their overwhelming advantages, the aliens had made mistakes. They controlled the obvious areas but ignored many secondary systems. They posted guards at main entrances but not at maintenance accesses. They were thinking like conquerors, not like defenders. And that might be the only chance Jake had to survive what was coming next. Jake spent the next 4 hours crawling through the maintenance tunnels like a ghost. The narrow spaces were uncomfortable, but they kept him hidden from the alien patrols above. Through air vents and service panels, he watched the creatures go about their work with military precision. The aliens were not just occupying the station randomly. They had a plan, and Jake needed to figure out what it was before it was too late. He moved carefully from section to section, taking notes on everything he saw. In the engineering bay, Jake observed a group of heavily armored aliens working on the station's power systems. They had connected strange devices to the main generators, boosting the output far beyond normal levels. The extra power was being fed to the communication array in the central hub. Through a crack in a wall panel, Jake watched 2 tall aliens with crystalline skin programming something into the station's computers. Their fingers moved faster than human hands could, typing commands in symbols that looked like flowing water. Whatever they were doing, it was important enough that they had posted guards at every entrance to the room. Jake found a way to tap into the data lines running through the maintenance areas. His military scanner could not translate the alien languages, but it could analyze patterns in their communications. The results were disturbing. The aliens were sending and receiving messages from at least 12 different locations in space. More aliens arrived every few hours through a docking bay Jake had not seen before. They came in small groups, but each group brought more equipment and weapons. Jake counted 5 different species working together, which was unusual. Most alien races he had encountered preferred to work alone. The insectoid creatures seemed to be in charge of security. They moved in coordinated patterns through the station, checking every corner and corridor on a regular schedule. Their compound eyes missed very little, but they focused on areas where humans would normally hide. They did not think to check the spaces between walls where only maintenance workers would go. The crystalline aliens handled all the technical work. They had modified every major system on the station, integrating their technology with human equipment in ways that should not have been possible. Jake watched them install devices that hummed with energy and projected holographic displays showing star maps of human territory. The armored, tank-like aliens were the muscle of the operation. They carried weapons that were larger than anything Jake had ever seen, energy cannons that could probably punch through the station's hull. but they moved slowly and seemed to rely on their thick armor instead of speed or tactics. There were also aliens that Jake could barely see. They seemed to shift in and out of visibility, like living shadows. These creatures moved through areas that the others considered secure, checking on equipment and carrying messages between different groups. Jake had to be extra careful when these shadow aliens were nearby. The fifth type of alien was the most disturbing. They looked almost human, but something was wrong with their proportions. Too tall, with limbs that bent in ways that made Jake uncomfortable to watch. These creatures seemed to be observers, studying the station and taking detailed recordings of everything. After 6 hours of careful observation, Jake began to understand the scope of what he was facing. This was not a random attack or exploration mission. The aliens were preparing for something much larger, and Kepler-7 was just the beginning. In the central communication hub, Jake found his answer. The massive transmitter the aliens had built was not just a radio. It was a quantum communication device that could send messages instantly across vast distances. The aliens were using it to coordinate with forces spread throughout human space. Jake managed to access one of the modified computer terminals when the alien technicians took a break. His translation software could only decode fragments of their data, but what it showed made his blood run cold. The aliens had detailed maps of 12 human colony worlds, population numbers, defense capabilities, shipping schedules. They were planning a coordinated attack on all 12 colonies at the same time. The assault would begin in less than 6 hours when the alien fleets reached their target positions. Earth Command had no idea what was coming. Jake tried to access the station's emergency communication system, but the aliens had completely taken control of it. His own emergency beacon had been damaged in the crash, and even if it worked, help would not arrive for days. The nearest human patrol was 3 star systems away. He was completely on his own, facing an enemy that outnumbered him 100 to 1. But as Jake studied the alien operations more closely, he began to notice weaknesses in their setup. The aliens were overconfident. They had overwhelming numbers and superior technology, so they had grown careless about security in areas they considered unimportant. They posted guards at obvious choke points but ignored secondary access routes that a human familiar with the station could use. Their coordination was impressive, but it also made them predictable. They followed set patterns and procedures, checking the same areas at the same times every hour. Once Jake learned their schedule, he could move through the station without being detected. Most importantly, the aliens did not truly understand human engineering. They had modified the station's systems to serve their purposes, but they had not changed the basic design. Every corridor, every room, every piece of equipment had been built by humans for human use. Jake knew this station better than any alien ever could. The aliens saw Kepler-7 as a tool to be used for their invasion plans. But Jake was beginning to see it as something else entirely. In the right hands, with the right knowledge, the entire station could become a weapon. Jake checked his rifle and counted his remaining ammunition. 43 rounds in his current magazine, plus 2 spare magazines in his pack. Against 100 alien soldiers, it would not be nearly enough for a conventional fight. But Jake was not planning a conventional fight. He was planning something the aliens would never expect. Something their military training and superior technology could not prepare them for. He was going to turn their own conquest against them. The aliens had 6 hours to complete their preparations and launch their attack on human colonies. Jake intended to make sure they never got the chance. The battle for Kepler-7 was about to begin, and the aliens were about to learn why humans were considered the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not because they were the strongest or had the best weapons, but because they could see possibilities where others saw only problems. Jake Morrison was about to prove that one human with the right plan could defeat any number of enemies, no matter how advanced their technology or how perfect their coordination. Jake had less than 6 hours to stop the alien attack on 12 human colonies. He moved through the maintenance tunnels with new purpose, no longer just observing, but preparing for war. Every system on Kepler-7 could become a weapon if he used it correctly. The station's industrial replicators were his first stop. These machines could create replacement parts and basic equipment from raw materials. Jake carefully programmed them to produce additional ammunition for his rifle and simple explosive devices. He had to work slowly to avoid triggering security alerts, but after 2 hours he had tripled his ammunition supply. The explosives were crude but effective. Jake used metal containers from the station's supply rooms and filled them with reactive chemicals from the maintenance stores. Each bomb was small enough to hide in ventilation shafts or behind wall panels, but powerful enough to seal blast doors or create deadly fragments in confined spaces. Jake studied the station's layout and identified 17 key choke points where he could force the aliens to fight on his terms. These were places where corridors narrowed, where multiple passages joined together, or where important systems created natural bottlenecks. At each location, Jake placed explosives and prepared backup plans. The station's environmental controls became Jake's most important weapon. From a hidden terminal in the maintenance area, he could control artificial gravity, atmospheric pressure, temperature, and air composition in every room. The aliens had modified many systems, but they had left the environmental controls alone because they seemed unimportant. Jake programmed several deadly scenarios into the system. He could shut off gravity in specific corridors, leaving enemies floating helplessly while he shot them from cover. He could flood rooms with industrial gases that would burn alien lungs or freeze their equipment. He could even use the fire suppression system to spray foam that would blind and trap his enemies. The mining equipment in the lower levels offered even more possibilities. Conveyor belts that could carry explosives into enemy positions, ore crushers that could be activated remotely to destroy anything in their path, loading arms that could be used to grab and throw objects with tremendous force. Jake spent precious time learning how to operate these systems from the maintenance terminals. The controls were designed for human workers, but Jake had to figure out how to use them as weapons instead of tools. He practiced moving the equipment remotely, timing their operations, and planning how to coordinate multiple systems at once. The station's communication network gave Jake another advantage. He could access the intercom system and the emergency broadcast channels. During the fighting, he could use these to confuse the aliens with false information, or coordinate his attacks with perfectly timed announcements. Jake also discovered something interesting about the alien modifications to the station's computers. The creatures had integrated their technology with human systems, but they had not changed the basic security protocols. Jake's military access codes still worked in many areas that the aliens considered secure. This gave him access to internal sensors throughout the station. He could monitor alien positions in real time, track their movements, and predict where they would go next. The aliens thought they controlled Kepler-7, but Jake could see everything they did from his hidden terminals in the maintenance areas. The station's power distribution system offered Jake his most devastating weapon. The aliens had boosted the generators to provide extra energy for their communication array, but this made the entire electrical system unstable. Jake could create controlled power surges that would overload alien equipment or shut down their shields at critical moments. More importantly, Jake discovered he could trigger an electromagnetic pulse by overloading specific circuits in the station's fusion reactor. The pulse would disable all electronic equipment in the affected area, including alien weapons and armor. It would only last for a few minutes, but that might be enough to turn the tide of battle. Jake positioned supply caches throughout the station, hiding extra ammunition and equipment in places where he could reach them during the fighting. He could not carry everything he needed, but he could make sure supplies were available wherever the battle took him. The station's medical bay provided Jake with stimulants and painkillers that would keep him fighting even if he was injured. He also found surgical tools that could serve as backup weapons if his rifle failed. Every piece of equipment on Kepler-7 could serve multiple purposes if Jake was creative enough. As the final hours approached, Jake realized his biggest advantage was not any single weapon or system. It was his complete understanding of how everything on the station worked together. The aliens saw individual pieces of equipment, but Jake saw an integrated machine that could be turned against its current occupants. The aliens were soldiers, trained to fight with weapons and tactics they understood. But Jake was about to force them into a kind of battle they had never experienced. He would use the station itself as his weapon, turning every room into a trap and every system into a tool of war. Jake checked his preparations one final time. Explosives were positioned and armed. Environmental controls were programmed and ready. Equipment was tested, and supply caches were stocked. He had transformed Kepler-7 from an alien stronghold into a death trap that only he knew how to navigate. The way aliens would have their superior numbers and advanced technology, but Jake would have something more important, the home field advantage. He knew every corner of this station, every system, every weakness that could be exploited. When the fighting started, the aliens would discover that controlling a human facility and understanding it were two very different things. Jake moved to his final position in the maintenance level above the communication array. The aliens were preparing to send their attack orders to the fleets waiting near human colonies. In a few minutes, Jake would announce his presence by destroying their primary communication system. The battle would begin with the aliens confident in their overwhelming superiority. It would end with them learning a hard lesson about underestimating human ingenuity and determination. Jake Morrison was ready to show them why humans were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Jake waited in the darkness above the communication array, watching the alien technicians prepare to send their attack orders. The crystalline creatures worked quickly at their controls. Unaware that death hung just above their heads, Jake checked his rifle one last time and took careful aim. The pulse blast caught the lead technician in the center of its chest. Sparks exploded from the communication console as the creature fell backwards, its glowing armor flickering and going dark. The other aliens in the room spun around in confusion, searching for the source of the attack. Jake was already moving. He triggered his first prepared trap as alarms began screaming throughout the station. The artificial gravity in the central corridor shut off instantly, leaving the first response team floating helplessly in zero gravity as they rushed toward the communication hub. 8 aliens tumbled through the air, their graceful movements becoming clumsy, flailing as they tried to find something solid to push against. Their energy shields were designed to stop incoming fire, not to provide stability in weightless conditions. Jake picked them off one by one from his concealed position, his shots precise and deadly. The floating aliens tried to return fire, but their weapons spun wildly in their hands with each recoil. Energy blasts scorched the corridor walls harmlessly, as Jake systematically eliminated the entire squad. In 90 seconds, 8 elite alien warriors were dead, their bodies drifting slowly through the air like broken toys. The survivors tried to retreat, but Jake had sealed the blast doors behind them with his explosives. They were trapped in a section of corridor that Jake could control completely. He activated the fire suppression system, flooding the area with industrial foam that hardened quickly around the aliens. As they struggled against the solidifying foam, Jake switched the temperature controls to maximum cold. Sub-zero air rushed through the vents, flash freezing the foam and cracking the aliens' energy shields. Their movements became slower as hypothermia set in, making them easy targets for Jake's follow-up shots. By the 2-minute mark, 15 aliens were dead, and Jake was already repositioning through the maintenance tunnels. The alien commanders were shouting orders in their various languages, organizing a larger assault force to hunt down the saboteur. 20 warriors advanced on Jake's last known position from 3 different directions, but they found only empty corridors. Jake had moved to the hydroponics bay, where earth plants grew under artificial sunlight. The humid environment would confuse their thermal sensors and give him new advantages. When the aliens burst into the bay expecting to find their enemy, they instead walked into a jungle that Jake had turned into a weapon. High-pressure water and nutrient solutions sprayed from irrigation nozzles that Jake had reprogrammed. The scalding liquid hit the aliens with the force of fire hoses, sending them stumbling into the thick vegetation. Jake used the tall plants as cover, appearing and disappearing among the green leaves like a hunting predator. His shots came from unexpected angles as he moved through the artificial forest. The aliens tried to coordinate their search, but the dense foliage broke up their formations. Several aliens fired their energy weapons at Jake's muzzle flashes, but the high-powered beams ignited the plants around them. Smoke and flame filled the bay, creating even more chaos and confusion. The aliens' advanced targeting systems became useless in the burning jungle. Jake slipped away through a maintenance hatch as the aliens fought the fires they had created. He left 12 more bodies behind in the hydroponics bay. Their advanced armor, no protection against human tactics they had never encountered. The mining level became Jake's masterpiece of improvised warfare. The aliens followed him into the industrial area, confident that their superior numbers would overwhelm him in open space. They did not understand that Jake had turned every piece of equipment into a weapon. Conveyor belts carried his explosives into the middle of alien formations before detonating in showers of deadly metal fragments. Ore crushers activated as aliens passed beneath them, their massive jaws snapping shut with bone-crushing force. Loading arms swung through the air like giant clubs, powered by hydraulics designed to move tons of rock. Jake controlled it all from hidden terminals, orchestrating a symphony of destruction while staying invisible in the maze of machinery. The aliens tried to destroy the equipment, but their energy weapons only created more hazards as molten metal and sparking electronics added to the chaos. The alien commanders realized they were fighting something beyond their experience. This was not conventional warfare, but something closer to madness. Jake attacked from impossible directions, disappeared completely, then struck again from angles that should not have existed. By minute 12, 70 aliens were dead, and panic was spreading among the survivors. These were elite warriors who had conquered a dozen worlds, but they had never faced an enemy who could turn an entire environment against them. Jake's tactics were not just unconventional, they were actively chaotic. The station's announcement system crackled to life with Jake's voice. "Attention, alien forces. You are surrounded by one very angry human. I suggest you surrender now because in about 6 minutes, none of you will be alive to regret this invasion." The psychological effect was devastating. The remaining aliens knew that one human had killed 70 of their best warriors in 12 minutes. Their confidence shattered as they realized their technological superiority meant nothing against an enemy who could reshape reality itself. Jake herded the survivors toward the central hub using carefully timed explosions and environmental hazards. The 30 remaining aliens barricaded themselves around their damaged communication equipment, believing their energy shields and superior firepower would protect them in a direct confrontation. They were wrong. Jake had saved his best surprise for last. He triggered the electromagnetic pulse he had prepared in the station's fusion reactor. Every piece of alien technology in the hub simply died, leaving them defenseless in the sudden darkness. In 18 minutes of combat, Jake Morrison had eliminated 100 alien warriors and saved 12 human colonies from destruction. The battle was over, and humanity had won. Jake Morrison stood alone in the emergency lighting of the central hub, surrounded by 100 alien bodies. The battle had lasted exactly 18 minutes from first shot to final casualty. Smoke drifted through the air from damaged equipment, and the smell of burned alien technology filled his nose. He moved carefully through the carnage, checking each body to make sure the threat was truly ended. Some of the crystalline aliens still glowed faintly even in death, their internal light fading slowly like dying stars. The armored tank-like creatures had cracked open like eggs, revealing soft pink flesh inside their protective shells. Jake's uniform was torn and stained with alien fluids of various colors. His left arm ached from a grazing energy blast, and his ears rang from the explosions he had triggered throughout the station. But he was alive, and the aliens were not. That was all that mattered. The communication array was completely destroyed, its alien modifications scattered in pieces across the hub floor. Jake found the main computer core still functional and began uploading everything he had learned to Earth Command. The intelligence would be valuable for future encounters with the Zephyrian Empire. Jake spent the next 3 days alone on Kepler 7, waiting for rescue and studying alien technology. He carefully documented every piece of equipment, every weapon, every modification the aliens had made to the station. His military training included basic xenobiology, and he was able to determine useful information about each alien species. The crystalline creatures were from a high-gravity world and relied on their energy shields more than armor. Their weapons were powerful but took time to recharge between shots. Jake noted that they became sluggish in cold temperatures, which explained why his freeze trap had worked so well. The armored aliens were physically strong but slow to react. Their thick shells could stop most human weapons, but they had weak points at the joints where flexibility was needed. Jake had discovered this during the mining-level battle when his explosives had found gaps in their protection. The shadow aliens that could turn invisible were the most interesting. Jake found devices on their bodies that bent light around them, but the technology required enormous amounts of power. Extended use would drain their equipment quickly, forcing them to become visible again at the worst possible times. Jake also studied the nearly human aliens and found disturbing evidence that they were not natural creatures. Surgical scars and artificial implants suggested they had been modified from some other species. Their purpose seemed to be observation and intelligence gathering, rather than direct combat. The insectoid aliens were the most militarily competent of the 5 species. Their coordination and tactics were excellent, but they relied too heavily on established patterns. Once Jake had learned their patrol schedules, they became predictable and easy to avoid or ambush. 3 days after the battle, Jake heard the familiar sound of human engines approaching the station. He activated the docking bay controls and watched as 3 Earth Defense Force ships moved into position. The lead vessel was the EDF Ranger, a patrol cruiser that Jake recognized from previous missions. Commander Lisa Hayes led the boarding party that entered Kepler-7 expecting to find either a destroyed station or an active battle zone. Instead, they found Jake calmly working at a computer terminal in the main hub, surrounded by carefully organized piles of alien equipment and detailed analysis reports. "Sergeant Morrison," Commander Hayes said, looking around at the alien bodies that had been moved to orderly rows along the walls. "What exactly happened here?" Jake stood and saluted, his torn uniform still carrying the stains of battle. "Ma'am, I encountered an advance force of the Zephyrian Empire consisting of 100 enemy combatants from 5 different species. They had taken control of this station and were preparing to coordinate attacks on 12 human colonies." "Commander," Hayes walked through the hub, examining the damage and the alien corpses. Her team of specialists began scanning the captured technology with instruments that beeped and hummed. "And you eliminated this threat single-handedly?" "Yes, ma'am. The enemy was eliminated in 18 minutes of active combat. No human colonies were attacked, and I have recovered significant intelligence about Zephyrian military capabilities and technology." One of the specialists looked up from an alien weapon he was examining. "Commander, this energy rifle is more advanced than anything in our database. The power output readings are incredible. How did one person defeat enemies carrying equipment like this?" Jake answered before Commander Hayes could respond. "They were thinking like soldiers, sir. Disciplined and coordinated but predictable. They saw this station as a base to be controlled. I saw it as a weapon to be used. They had better technology, but I had better understanding of the battlefield." Commander Hayes reviewed Jake's reports while her team continued cataloging alien equipment. The intelligence was more detailed and useful than anything Earth Command had ever obtained about hostile alien species. Jake had not just won an impossible battle, he had turned it into a learning opportunity. "This information will change how we prepare for future alien encounters," Commander Hayes said. "You've given us tactical data, technological specifications, and psychological profiles of 5 different enemy species. The value to Earth's defense cannot be calculated." Jake nodded, but remained focused on practical matters. "Ma'am, I recommend immediate upgrades to station security protocols. The aliens exploited several weaknesses in our standard designs. I have suggestions for improvements based on what I observed during the battle." Word of the Battle of Kepler-7 spread quickly through human space. One Marine had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious, saving 12 colonies and providing valuable intelligence about a dangerous new enemy. The story grew with each telling, but the core truth remained unchanged. Jake Morrison returned to active duty after medical evaluation and debriefing. His name entered the records of human military heroes, studied by cadets who wanted to understand how creative thinking and determination could overcome any disadvantage. The battle became a symbol of human potential, proof that no enemy was too strong and no situation too hopeless if humans were willing to think beyond conventional solutions. In the years that followed, as humanity encountered new threats among the stars, military commanders would ask themselves a simple question. What would Jake Morrison do? The galaxy had learned an important lesson at Kepler-7. Humans were not just another species to be conquered or dismissed. They were survivors, innovators, and warriors who could turn any situation to their advantage. The Zephyrian Empire would discover this truth at great cost in the wars that followed. But the lesson began with one human who refused to accept defeat.